Hello, everyone. I think I've done everything right getting here today. I'm on time. I've got sound. I'm on the right feed. It's a little scary. I'm just wondering what's going to go wrong. But welcome, everyone. I see there's so many people already in the chat. I'm going to say hi to my friend Barb from Hamilton. And there's some other people like Anne Rankin that I recognize, and Lynn So Imperfect from Amherst, New York. We've got a couple of people here from Australia. Lisa Jervis from Ottawa. Don Snyder. Oh boy. I love it when I recognize these names. So I hope you are all well. Right now in Toronto, we are in the dark days of winter. We're closely approaching the darkest day, and it is very depressing to be out at 5 o'clock and have everything so dark. But I'm sure there's a couple of people here from Alaska who can tell us even darker stories. So I think I should be just happy with what I've got. So many people here could be celebrating Hanukkah, or they're getting ready for Christmas. So we're already in deep holiday mode everywhere. I'm looking, we've already got lots of questions here, but let me just start with a couple that came in earlier today. From So Thingy, she put it in on, pretty sure that came from YouTube. She's asking, how do you develop a consistent sewing routine? And way back when I took my black belt, I was one of the other people I was training with was talking to me about how to build a routine. So when you show up, you are ready to do what you're supposed to do. And your brain is in the mode and you can just go forward. So part of it is putting a priority on that time. So if you're a mother or a daughter or just an employee, everybody is trying to impinge on that time, and you just have to make it sacrosanct for you because it's your mental health and you have to do something for yourself every week. So part of it is just identifying when is the best time for you. When do you feel most creative? And when do you have the brain power? There's a lot of people, including myself, have gotten into the habits sometimes of working at night after dinner, and it feels good. You're in the zone and you're working past midnight and you're just having a good time and you feel good, like you're doing something good for yourself. But the long-term repercussions of not getting enough sleep are tough. Like it gets you into a whole spiral of you're tired in the morning and you overeat, and then you don't feel good about doing this, and you're not feeding yourself the right way. So identify a good time for you and when you can sew. I can remember many years ago following a woman, the Fly Lady woman, and she was always of the opinion that you should get up a half an hour before everybody else and just sort of get your brain in gear. And I really believe that too. You know, harvest the time from the early part of the day, because then you've done it, then you've rewarded yourself, and it's not something that you do with the leftover energy at the end of the day. You do it with your good energy at the beginning of the day. But whenever you decide it, try to get yourself into a routine in before you leave your sewing practice for the day. Set yourself up for what you're going to be doing the next time. So it's not just this, oh my God, I'm going to have to do this, and I'm going to have to do this, and I'm going to have to do that. Be ready and prepared. So all you have to do is sit down and sew. And just know that our lives are never stable. We think we've got an equilibrium, and it may be for about a week, sometimes it seems, before something else enters our life and throws it out of kilter. So you do have to be a little bit flexible in your planning too. So I hope that helps. And Audrey Kando has asked, what is my go-to project when you've lost your Sojo? For me, my go-to project is sewing crumbs and sewing scrap blocks. And I actually had a video a couple of months ago about keeping it simple. Keeping it simple. And I had taken all these scrap blocks that I had made over the past year and I put them together into quilts. And it was just perfect. There was no planning I needed to do. It was a very light load on my head. And yeah, quilts came out the other end. So it's a win-win. Sam Smith has asked, I am hoping to make some last-minute Christmas placemats, but struggling to choose a block design. Do you have any suggestions? Well, my favorite placemat design is just sewing quilt as you go with long strips. And if they're for Christmas, you just choose your red and green ones, but you can always match their decor by just finding your scraps that are in the same color as their decor. And it's fast, it's simple, and because you're quilting as you go, all you need to do is put a binding around it. Now, I do have one suggestion, just taking it to another level. I find placemats get really bunchy and unattractive once they're washed. So I will always wash or shrink my batting ahead of time. Now, I'm not talking about a big piece. I'm just taking it in the size of the placemat, and I take 2 pillowcases. I put a pillowcase down, then I put the batting, then I put another one on top, and I just make that wet. And then I let it dry. I'm not agitating it in any way, and I'm just doing that. And that way it shrinks, and I make sure my strips are shrunk too. And that way when the placemat is washed at a later date, because they do get dirty, it remains flat. It doesn't get all bunched up. Deborah Moore has asked, what size needles do you use for piecing? Are they Microtex? For free motion quilting on a domestic machine, any needle and thread weight you prefer, cotton versus polyester for free motion quilting. So I piece with a 75 quilting, and I quilt with a 90 quilting. Now, that is just my preference. Other people can use a 70, some people use 80. It's up to you to practice and see what you like in your stitches, but I would use either a Microtex or a quilting needle. I wouldn't use it. You can use a universal one, and get satisfactory results. So it's up to you and the way that you sew. I just buy a tray of needles at the beginning of the year in the 2 sizes, and then I just use those. The weight, I always use 50 weight for piecing. And for free motion quilting, it depends on whether I want the quilting to show or not. If I want the quilting to show, then I sometimes use a 40 weight thread. If I don't want the quilting to show, which is sometimes when you're quilting in the ditch or you just want your fabrics to be the star, I sometimes go down to a 60. So again, I have a video about making a library of your stitches, your binding, and your thread. And I recommend that you do that with every single project that you do. Just draw a line and then mark down what you used so you can remember how it looked on different colors, how it looked on different weights of fabric, and whether you liked the results. So I think it's called making a library. Just Google making a stitch library or something on my channel and you'll find it. And O Yarny has asked, building on quilting skills, which would you recommend the next skill to learn after HSTs? And you have said flying geese, and that can be the next one, or it can be the hourglass block. So that's working with quarter square triangles. And after that, or alongside of that, it would be working with L blocks or log cabins or courthouse steps. They all kind of work on the same principle. And it's so much harder than you think to keep those pieces parallel. And I was just thinking yesterday about making a video about that, how I would teach that. So and what kind of little hacks I could put in. So maybe I'll do that in the new year. But that's where you go. So you, with the HST, you're most of the time you're making 2 at a time. So that's a pretty steady thing. And with the flying geese, it's the same way. You're working with rectangles and you're either flipping the corner or you're doing the 4 at a time method. When you get into quarter HSTs, and that's when things begin to be stretchy and the bias is a little bit more challenging. So that's why I've put them in that hierarchy. So we have a lot of people here. Let me go through here. Dawn Snyder has a question. I made a quilt starting with a center block working out, and it's puffy. It did not pull tight to make pieces fit. Any idea on how to remove the puffiness? Some said it will wash out. I think you're talking about working with a medallion, and part of that is just the challenge of doing a courthouse step. The same thing that I was talking about with the log cabin blocks. There's a fullness that comes in. One part is secured with stitches, but then there's a fullness as your threads are on the cross grain, or sometimes they're on the bias. And the trick is just, as you're making it, is just to confirm every single time that it's square. Lose a point, but keep it square. Once it's big, some people can quilt that out. But if it's on the outermost edges that you see it, I would try and take it in. I have a quilt that I've sort of postponed working on because it has a fullness in a corner that I have to take some of it out. So the easiest way, and I know it may not sound the easiest way, but sometimes the easiest way is to actually rip out some rows and take out some fullness from a couple of rows. You don't have to pull out the whole row. You may just have to do it from the corners. But there are some very experienced quilters out there, long armors, that can pull in all that fullness. So yeah, it's a tough situation to be in. I know, yeah, my recommendation is to pull some of that fullness out. Now, if you're on the borders, and I'm trying to see whether I've got some fabric here. Sometimes, like, let's just say this piece of fabric here is your border and it's floppy. Sometimes you can just fold it in and then just do a line of stitching on it, tucking in that fullness. So you've got a little bit there, and then just quilt the hell out of it. And I have done that myself. I've had a couple of quilts where the border was full, but while I was long arming it, I just took it in right there and then and pebbled it. And nobody has ever noticed. Okay, so I'm just looking through here. We've got people from Indiana. Lexi is here. Should we not iron wool batting? Will ironing it after spray basting, which some quilters recommend, compress and ruin the loft? I've never heard of that being an issue, but if you're at all worried about it, do a tester. I've never heard of a problem with the ironing wool. If there's a problem with the loft in that moment, there's always that when you wash it or whatever, you can fluff it up by just throwing into the dryer, and not heat, no heat on it, but just throw it into the dryer and let the tumbling bring out the fullness again. Jennifer Hayden has asked, what is my preferred binding width and techniques for joining bindings? So I've got a whole series on binding, and the way that I join the strips together depends on how quickly I want the quilt done and often who I'm making it for. So if I'm wanting to do it quickly, I will do the fold over and tuck in the end method. I call that fast and easy. And anyone that I'm sewing on the binding for, I will definitely join the strips together and collapse it that way. So my preferred width, I am all over the map. I mean, 2.5 inch is easy because I have a lot of rulers that way. Jelly Roll strips are 2.5 inch, but there's a lot of quilts where I go bigger and occasionally a couple of quilts where I go smaller. It really is just the look that I'm looking for when I fold over when I'm testing the different fabrics. I'll take a look and see how much color I want, how much impact I want the binding to have. I have made 1 inch wide binding on a number of quilts because the inside is just so bright and busy. It needs something stronger to hold it all together. So it's just me. I like playing with binding widths. Ooh, I'm saying hi to people in Illinois and Missouri. Mary Whitney has said she is making a disappearing nine patch. For some reason, she decided to use directional fabrics on all four corners. How do I think this through? Do I turn some quarters upside down or sideways? So that happens to everyone. Sometimes you don't even realize that a fabric is directional until you cut into it. You can always cut another block, maybe, if you've got extra fabric, but just see whether you want them to spin or you want them to close in. I like the symmetry of it. So if there's two going one way and two going the other way, I can balance that symmetry. And if there's four identical, then you balance the symmetry that way. So yeah, if you have a chance to cut extra, you can if you don't like the look. But you should be able to get through that. Wow, we got lots of people here. London, Ontario, Maryland, Arizona, Missouri, Woodstock, Ontario. I haven't heard of Woodstock. I used to go through Woodstock on my way to London all the time. I had 2 children at school in London. So, oh boy, lots of people. I am so glad you're here. Tasmania, and it's 33 degrees. Yes, you're going into summer, aren't you? So I'm just looking for some more questions. Here we go. All the tips. I have everybody's attention. If you haven't signed up for the Declutter Challenge this year, it is already live on my website. Just sign up. There's nothing that you need to do now. But if you register now, you'll get an email when we start. I usually pop in a couple of days early just to give you some marching orders. And then every day you'll receive an email with a connection to the video and the blog. Yeah. Donna Ricketts has asked, what about all the quilts that are not finished for years? I like to make one quilt at a time, but I'm behind to do customer quilts first. I finally have 5 quilts not done, making me crazy. Well, you can choose to work on your own instead of your customers. But you can also, you like to work on one at a time, and that's the way you prefer to work. Myself, I would sneak in 15 to 20 minutes every day working on my own stuff and then work on their stuff. But if you prefer to work at them all at once, then you're going to have to take a break. I know it sounds simple, and I know it can be much more difficult than that, but that's sometimes what you need to do. Kentucky is in the house. Welcome, Elaine. Someone from Guelph. That's just down the highway from me. Sept-Îles, Quebec. When making placemats, do you have to use a stabilizer instead of batting? Well, it's up to you, Vicky. So the question is, when you're making placemats, do you have to have the batting in the middle, or can you use interfacing? You can use interfacing. You can use a stabilizer. You can use a lightweight batting. It's often better to use a polyester just because it's less expensive, but some polyesters are really, really thick. So often, I think most of the time when I'm making placemats, I'm using up old batting, so I'm using cotton. Okay, Diane Hackett has asked, what pattern would you suggest for a first quilt top beyond simple blocks? So I know when we do a first quilt, we all want to stretch ourselves because we want something pretty and more to your own energy, and just a block quilt, maybe not it. But I do recommend making a block quilt for your first quilt because you just learn so much. And you don't necessarily want to make a king size quilt. Uh, Everybody raise your hand that did that for your first quilt, because it'll just take so long. You'll learn so much, and the blocks that you make at the end of the quilt will not be the same as the ones that you made at the beginning. But saying a block quilt doesn't mean squares. You can make rectangles and do like a subway tile type of pattern. You can turn those blocks on point, so you work on angles. Again, look back to the video on simple quilts that I did. I think it went live in September. And that can show you a lot of different possibilities for some very, very simple quilts. And it's not always about making complicated, busy, small pieces or large pieces. It's often where just tilting it on point can make a huge difference in what it is. And if you make rectangles on a tilt, and honestly, I know even though you're a beginner, you don't necessarily have to put them on a 45-degree angle. You can put them on a 30-degree or a 60-degree and do it that way. So yeah, play with those, but play with that simpleness for your first quilt, because you just don't want to be burdened with a UFO. You don't want to spend money on lots of beautiful fabric and then get frustrated with it in the middle of it because it's either too complicated or too big, or, as I said, your first blocks are not as pretty as your later blocks. So now I did get a question. I'm not sure quite where I saw it. It was from someone today saying, how do you say no to doing charity blocks or charity quilts? She feels like all she's doing now is making charity quilts for her guild instead of working on her own projects. You just have to put the limitation. Just say no. And I know that's very difficult for a lot of people to say no. Because people will come up to you and say, please. And we're so many of us are pleasers. But you also have to say yes to me and yes to yourself. So I'm trying to think of some lines that you could use. You can say, yes, I can make one, but after I finish this one. I know there's many long armors. I know people are trying to always scooch in front. This is desperate or whatever. And they will say, no, I will have time for you. And this is when I will have time for you. And I think if you're making even one charity quilt a year, you're doing good works. And don't undervalue working on those charity quilts, because they are really appreciated. But I'm just thinking of some other lines. Maybe some other people have some opinion on some ways that people can say no. Just put it in the comments here. Hi, Lynn. You've been with me for 25 months. Wow. Thank you so much. Okay, from Scotland. Have you ever... Fee from Edinburgh, Scotland has asked, have I ever quilted with wool tweed? I have a bundle and thinking about it. No, but I know there's a lot of people that quilt with wool, both in the like felted, not felted wool, but wool that has been, brushed off and then wool squares. So I don't think it's outrageous to think that you could do that. So give it a go. As I say, always experiment. Roseanne Smythe has asked, what is my fave regular or specialty batting combo for potholders or placemats? For placemats, it's different. Placemats, as I say, I just use my leftover batting and I franken bat it together if I don't have the right size. But for potholders, things where I'm going to be grabbing something hot, I always put a layer of aluminized cotton in there. I have scraps left over from some ironing tables that I was making, so that's what I've used. Paula Very has asked, have I ever tried the bobbin thread that's very fine for quilting? No, I have not. I just really have not had a purpose for it, but I have used 60 weight thread in my bobbin, not the super fine, but 60 weight, and it's absolutely fine. I use it all the time and enjoy it. Those pre-wound bobbins, I never thought I'd say this, but I really enjoy using them. They're nice and easy. You just pop them in and away you go. Just looking at everybody. Denise Simmons from Maryland, North Carolina. Michelle in North Carolina. Are you near Raleigh? Are you going to see us in QuiltCon next year? It's getting close. It seems so far away, but it's almost only two months away. Anderson, Indiana. Vero Beach, Florida. Bernadine from Las Vegas. I just read that Las Vegas is the town, one of the cities in the U.S. where more people are moving to than any other place. Lynn Walker has said she has used, I'm not even sure how you pronounce it, Actra Bright in a placemat, but never sure what side should be up. Doesn't matter. I presume that's going to be an interfacing that has some kind of aluminum or something in it. So what you want is, well, it really, I think at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. Sorry. Somebody's from Fort Francis, Ontario. I thought we called that Thunder Bay. Elizabeth. Sewing Mama Julie is sick on her couch in Wisconsin. I am sorry. I hope you're feeling better soon. Belinda Sheehan has asked, have I ever worked with recycled denim jeans? All the time. I have made so many things out of recycled jeans. Any tips that you have? Make sure you're using a denim needle. A denim needle is so much stronger and will help you get through all those layers. Don't stop at a 90. There's a larger one. I use 110, and it just really helps working with denim. You'll want to spin your corners because, again, denim is just so much thicker, but denim makes beautiful tied quilts. So you might consider that instead of quilting it. Okay, let's see. Sorry, I'm just here on my own, so I've just got to read. Serafina Knits Community has said, what are my tips for t-shirt quilts? Well, I interviewed a wonderful woman, Eileen, and she talked about Karen's Quilt Circle, and she does t-shirt quilts all the time. I think she had done well over 200. That was their business, or 2,000. But from my own experience making them is you have to come to terms with that you've got to buy the stabilizer, and you have to spend all the time ironing that stabilizer onto the t-shirts, and that takes that takes time. It's tedious. You cannot rush it. You cannot swoosh your iron. You've got to just let it press and let the glue melt and stabilize it. And but t-shirt quilts can be fun. Just have that funny spot in the middle. And I've actually used my serger a couple of times on them. So don't hesitate to use that if that will work out better for you. Fire Dreams, it says, what's your best pattern suggestion for somebody quilting less than 3 years? I want a challenge, but not to cry. Well, check out some of my Stash Busters. They're on, there's a playlist on YouTube with them. Stash Buster number 1 is excellent. The Ugly Quilt is a good one. One of my favorites ones is Stash Buster number 2, but then I start looking at them and I love number 4. I'm just about to remake number 8. Number 8 was the one made out of the jelly roll. I say I'm never buying another jelly roll. Well, I went out the other day and I bought another jelly roll. My son and his partner have that quilt, so I don't actually have an example of Stash Buster 8 anymore. So I thought, well, I'm going to make another one then. So, but try some of those. If you want something a little bit more precision, Stash Buster number 10 is about a carpenter style. And the good thing about the Stash Buster patterns is they don't make a lot of scraps. So, yeah, and they're good fun quilts that you can have done fairly quickly. I know myself, it usually took me about a week or a couple of days on Stash Buster number 2 just took me 1 day, but it was intensive 1 day to do it. And as somebody called me on saying, quilting is about the enjoyment of it. So I no longer push myself through them. But even if you're a beginner, you should be able to get it done in a couple of hours here and there, and it shouldn't take you much more than a month or 2 to make it. Let me just see here. I should have you put a little emoji in front of your questions. Maybe use the red heart and put it in front of your questions so I can see them a little bit better. Hazel has asked, do you have any tips for somebody submitting a quilt for a country fair for the first time? Just read the application process. Some people get eliminated or not accepted just because they don't follow the steps involved in it. And other than that, have fun. Your first experience will be interesting. It will be interesting. So don't worry. Don't be fearful. I love going to county fairs and seeing all the quilts hanging. So just follow the directions, and when it's accepted, be sure to take photos because it'll be hanging beautifully with possibly a sheet or a wall behind it, and you'll have a good opportunity to take photos. And enjoy. Enjoy. Okay, so people have clarified it's called Insulite for pot holders. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so Kathy Terrell has said she's used tweed remnants to make a flannel back throw with cotton wadding. Very cozy and lovely. I also like the weight that the heavier fabrics bring to a quilt. I like that, a heavy quilt. Kathy Ryan has asked, Karen, when am I looking forward to sewing quilting this year? Challenging yourself on anything. Yes, I'm trying to get rid of the last of my, I'm trying to complete the last of my old projects. And when I say old projects, I mean ones that I started before, like years ago, like my brain, I know what I like to do now. I know what taste I like. I know the way I want to challenge myself, but I still have these leftover ones from before. So I'm hoping that by the end of January, I will have those. I have a quilt for my nephew that I've got to make. It's a wedding quilt, and it was 2 years ago, so it's about time that I finished that one off. And I'm looking. I have been having fun playing with pre-quilt once a week. I've tried to make it part of my practice just to sit down and doodle, just come up with ideas and say, what if? And I'd like to make a couple of the ones that I've liked the ideas on. I have a feeling I might be doing a paper piece pattern this year coming up with one of the designs that I made up. So yeah, that's what I'm hoping for next year. Um, a lot of people made sampler quilts here. Jean Sanders asked, do you use the quilt as you go method for t-shirt quilts? You could. You could. What you would do is you would make your quilt sandwich at the t-shirt level and then do your sashing. You can do your sashing the way of in the quilt as you go method #1, but there's a couple of other methods that you could use too. But I don't think it'd be necessarily easier for you to do it that way. If you have size limitations and things like that, but I think handling the stretch of the fabric and that, I'm not sure whether quilt as you go would be the right way. So you might want to try a couple of test pieces, as I said before. Lynn has given me a super sticker. Thank you so much, Lynn. Taxabella has asked me, what's my best recommendations for scrap sizes? So the best sizes for scraps are the ones that you like. What are you going to do with your scraps? So for me, and I said this in my video a couple of weeks ago, I cut 10-inch squares, which I use for the back of my Quilt As You Go blocks. I make 5-inch strips and I make 2.5-inch strips. And those, I can cut 5.5-inch strips into 2.5-inch strips if I choose them, but I make scrap sampler blocks out of those. That's what I do. Sometimes I just don't want to sew anything else and my head is heavy and they're an easy project to do. And I can just do a lot of different things with them. And then I have long skinny strips, which I use in Quilt As You Go. And then I have crumbs, and everybody has seen my crumb videos. I sew them together onto adding machine tape. I have 2 more blocks to make, and then I can put all those things together. And I've got to do it quickly because my son is coming to, at the end of the week, and I'm no longer going to have my sewing room. So, yeah, got to get going on that. But that's me. Okay, so you got to take a look at what you want to do. Do you want to use them in paper piecing? Do you want to do improv exercises? Do you want to just make block quilts out of them? I Spy quilts out of them. So find a couple of blocks that you like and then cut your scraps so that you can make those blocks and you can make them all the time. Yeah. Because you'll find after you've made a stack of them, because they're coming from your scraps, there are colors that you like to use and they go together a certain way. So there'll be a cohesiveness in your scrap blocks that you can pull out different ones. So I was able to pull out a whole section of orange, red, yellow, really warm colored blocks and make some really, what I like, really nice lap quilts, and it all went together, even though that they were scraps from all over, different fabric lines. Some were Tula, some were cotton and steel, some were, primitives. They all came together because of color. So again, use scraps the way you want to use them. And if you don't like scraps, or you don't like a lot of scraps, find a friend who does. Okay. Okay, some people are saying that they are looking forward to the declutter challenge, and so am I. I'm going to do a really big cleanup of my studio, which has become a dumping ground this year. So, looking forward to the declutter challenge myself. DD says, I can't find dining room curtains I like. I was thinking of making them from quilt blocks. I'll use flannel for batting. Would muslin be okay for backing? Um, yes, I think muslin would be okay for backing if you've got it. Um, I don't see any downsides to doing them that way. If you're using flannel and it'll keep the light out, you're going to have a lot of blocks. Well, you're going to know how to do them. Obviously you must have made curtains before, so you know all the ins and outs of doing that. But yeah, I don't see any problem with doing that. Oh, she says, I want the room darkening living in Las Vegas. Somebody has asked, have you tried pasting a quilt with Elmer's washable glue? No, never have. Never needed to. Um, I've there's so many other ways I would prefer to do it. They say it's washable, and if you've done a test run and you find that you like the results, well, then do it that way. But I don't need, well, one, I don't need to because I have a long arm now. And before, I just preferred to use basting spray. I really liked the results I got with basting spray. So that's what I did. Could you guys suggest some small quilted items to put up at a crafter's market? Well, it's hard because so much time and effort is put into quilting, and will you get your money back for it? So, out of, I'm trying to think of, do I have one here? I have a couple of videos where I've taken orphan blocks and I've turned them into weights, but yeah, unfortunately, I'm not really in the quilt market. I'm sure other people have ideas on what sells at quilt markets or at crafters markets. So, okay, let's see. Denise Simmons says, are there any retreats planned for 2024? I am not running any retreats, but I will be at the Quilts for Survivors weekend in the last week of September. I will be with them. So they're in Timmins, Ontario, if you're anywhere close. Under the Blue Sky 92. I'm not sure if anybody's read this. Any advice on using wool as batting? I raise my own sheep. I wash and hand card machine wool for it's clean, it's smooth, but in 12 by 20 strips, looking for warm but durable. I'm sorry, but I don't know anything about that. I was actually watching a video the other day of it was a knitting channel and they made their own wool and they from their own sheep and they were showing how to wash it and do all that work. It was a incredible amount of work that you have to do, but unfortunately I don't know. I'm sure that's the way what they used in quilts before, so I'm sure it's doable. I just don't have the answer for that, but I would be interested in learning about you following that. So keep me posted. Hey, my Jessica. Good to see you, Jessica. Okay, so I'm just looking. Okay, I think I'm at the end here. Liz Pelletier has asked me, do I wash all my quilts too? Um, I don't wash my quilts before I send them off. Uh, I've never had to. Like, I've never thought a quilt of mine was dirty. Um, I seem to keep, I feel I keep them fairly clean. Um, but I have definitely washed quilts um, after afterwards. And sometimes I've taken advantage of the features of wool, like my king size quilt, my blue, red, and yellow quilt that I made for my bed. I actually intentionally washed it because it was just too big. I had to shrink it down about 4 or 5 inches and that. But I normally I can wash a cuddle quilt in or a lap quilt in my washing machine, but anything bigger, like any of my queen size quilts or king size quilts, I go to a coin laundry and I throw them in the big washer extractors. And I just use regular soap and I use a cold water. Now, we're at the 45-minute mark here. Let me just run through a couple of things here. Now, if you're a member of my crew, and I know there's a number of members here, so if you haven't seen it yet, we have a Stitch and Chat this weekend. I know many of you will be busy. I have chosen 11 a.m., so anybody in Europe can reach it, and so can the people on the West Coast, and you can still have part of your day. So hopefully you can all make it. 2 of my last videos that I did, 10 of my top tips for scraps. You know I love using crumbs. There's a preview of what my crumb quilt will look like when it's finished. And of course, last week I had my gift guide. I thought when I got back from Hawaii, I had missed the date for it, but I had so many people asking me for it. I did do it. So a lot of people have seen my Panasonic iron. They did sponsor the video, but I stand behind that Panasonic iron wholeheartedly. It is one of my favorite tools in my space. Last week, Sarah Muslim Lefebvre, I'm pronouncing it the French way, not the way that she says it, unfortunately. She was my swap partner for QuiltCon 2021. She is just a phenomenal quilter. If you've seen her quilts at QuiltCon, you know what I'm talking about. The accuracy in her stitches and everything. And she generously shared some of her tips. She also had a quilt that bled and gave us a play-by-play on how she got the stains out. So rush over there and listen to that. That was a really wonderful interview. And the week before, I had Katie Matthews. Now, Katie Matthews is an electrician, not electrician. She's a technician, sewing machine technician. In the UK, they call them engineers. And she will be on the cruise to Iceland with us, maintaining the machines. And she has a wonderful story. So it's great to listen to her as well. So, now, if you want to go to my website, on the home page, where did that photo go? I thought for sure I did a photo just to show you just my website. So just go to justgetitdonequilts.com and it's just on the header. You don't need to do anything else. Go have a good time with your family. Don't worry about the declutter challenge until after Christmas. And I'll come back and I'll have some notes for you. And if you are thinking about a trip next year, I've got 2 trips planned. And if you go to my website on that hotels for a couple of days, and whoop, I'm unmuted. And I'm looking forward to it every time I dive into it, and I'm talking to the travel agents. I just I'm just so excited. They're just lovely, exciting things to do, and not just quilting. Like there's going to be other textiles involved too, and of course New Zealand and that beautiful country, and Cork, in Scotland. So I thank you everyone for showing up. This is just such a wonderful community, and Karen's Quilt Crew, thank you for all that you do, and looking forward to seeing you on Saturday. So again, if I haven't answered your question here, don't hesitate to put it in the notes. I always take a look at them. Some of them I use for video ideas, and some of them I'll answer in the next one. So take care, everyone, and I'll see you next time.